and do not reflect the opinions of InTouch Radio or its staff.
All right, good morning, good morning. Listen, man, every week, and I mean it every week. If you can hear the sultry sound of my voice, it is indeed a good morning. My name is Attorney Clarence in Paris, and you're on InTouch News Radio, reality radio, where everybody can be a star. And this is straight up the middle. Now, we've had this discussion over the years numerous times about how do we stay straight up the middle. But one way is you load up the right side to balance out the preponderance of righteousness and justice I bring from the left side, and somehow we end up in the middle. And to make all that happen, I have to have some other people help me in the process. First of all, let me bring to the microphone none other than the great Pete Edwards. Good morning, Pete. How are you doing?
Good morning, my brother. And once again, you sound like you're trying to be Will Downing or somebody like that now. So I'm not mad at you, bro. It's summertime, hot time in the city.
I hear you, Pete. Well, listen, everybody. You know, we log in on this show every week to try to decompress, digest, make some sense out of, bring some reality to, add some common thought and approaches to all the crazy stuff that happens just in a 7-day period. So if you miss us one week, you're going to fall way behind. You need to be here every week to catch up. And this week has been so just outrageous. We've got with us helping out this morning on the show none other than my other co-host, the professor himself, Professor Tony Seabrook. Good morning, Professor. How you doing?
Man, good morning. I'm glad to be here. Good morning. What's going on, Pete? I'm glad to be here with you as well.
Oh yeah, I'm doing fine. Clint, if I can, coming in today, and all this rain and all, I passed 4 cars that had children under 3. Looking out the window in the rain, no car seat, no nothing. So I don't know, Tony, I don't know, it's beyond politics, but it's strange to me that we can't have future leadership if our kids are not being protected by drivers that look like us, speeding in a rainy weather, and none of the kids having seat belts on in the back seat. No, it does not make sense. I passed one once again, probably about 2 or 3 years old, in front of the driver, in front of the steering wheel, off of MLK, I think, and 40th Street. We cannot have that.
Pete, you snitching?
Yes, absolutely.
You gave the street.
Yeah, but Pete, you bring up a key issue, and there are very minor things that lead to the proper development of a child. One of them is parents' obligation, first of all, to provide a safe environment for that child to grow and to prosper and to develop. That's basic. You know, if you can't get your child in a car seat, how am I expected to have you navigate your child through the education system? How am I expecting you to develop your child with some sense of financial literacy? Those are underlying factors that you're right about that. It is a big issue, and unfortunately, you have too many parents. Not with just that, and I think a lot of times these are younger parents who are just not understanding the necessity that you have a routine and discipline, and that you're teaching the child about the future of how they develop, though. So with that being said, I don't want to waste time chit-chatting about nothing else but these important things that happened this week.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to give y'all a softball. How do you Republicans feel about the rule of law and how it worked out for Bill Cosby?
Man, you know, let me go first, because I know you and Pete go all day with this. I was upset. Well, let me say this correctly. When Bill was convicted, and really through the trial, I wasn't one that says, oh, they're going after another black man. There are a lot of things that a lot of news sources that talked about he was trying to buy NBC at the time. And so this was, you know, trying to pull a black man down, blah, blah, blah. But I'm looking at his actual charges. So, and they were valid, and it made me, you know, sad in a way that, okay, here is your day. Now, you almost made it out of this, and now you're being pulled back for something that you, in fact, did. But when I read why the charges were dropped, and interestingly enough, like when I left the show, I stepped back from most social media, and it wasn't until the recent death that happened in my family that I started to go back on. But I caught a Judge Joe Brown interview with I think it's Lamont Hill,
Yes,
um,
yes.
and Judge Joe Brown put it out there, and he reminded me of, yeah, yeah. I mean, if you can't prove what I've done beyond a shadow of a doubt, that is the rule of law. And I know, Clint, you're a lawyer, and that's something that has to be a mantra. Even if your client is convicted because you couldn't prove it, we've had this conversation before about other things. It may have been about Donald Trump. I mean, if you can't prove it, then you can't prove it.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean they're innocent necessarily, but you can't prove it. Joe Brown talked about, the Emmett Tills and every other black man who has been done an injustice in this country because people got in their emotions and didn't go with the rule of law, but got in their emotions. So with that case, and especially the way Judge Joe Brown put it, I'm like, man, good for Bill. Now I was kind of concerned. Why is Bill nose so light? I'm like, what's up with his nose? Is that powder on his nose? I've never seen his nose so light. But let's leave that alone. But okay, go ahead.
All right, here's the thing, Clint.
Go
Here's
ahead,
the
Pete.
thing. I think we all knew he was probably that conviction was going to be reversed just by prosecutorial misconduct. And the issue about the rule of law is how do you apply it consistently and fairly with regards to people of different races, ethnicity, background, stuff like that. If the rule of law is the rule of law, then that's what it should be because there's a possibility that Harvey Weinstein may have some of his charges dropped. So I'm talking to a black female, and her thing was, well, it shouldn't have applied to Cosby. Listen, when I look at the rule of law, if the law say a reversal is at hand, I may not like it and all, but if they reverse it for a white guy whose name was Cosby, then they should reverse it for a black guy whose name may be Cosby. So you have to throw the morality and all that out the window when you're talking about application of appeals and the rule of law. And Clint and Tony, you all are aware a lot of times you will have a defense attorney will plead a defendant guilty in an offense, but they will go on record and say, hey, we want to confirm our right to appeal, although we're pleading guilty. Other times you have people will waive their right to appeal and plead guilty. So I'm not surprised about the verdict. I think in those kind of cases, it's you got to go by the rule of law. The only question is with Black America is how do we push the rule of law with regards to us being given an opportunity to be judges to evaluate the rule of law? And I'll leave it at that.
Well, Pete, I think you put it very soundly because one of the things that always has bothered me, and the reason I really want to get into the legal system was it is the place where the most error has the most impact on people's lives, other than medicine. In medicine, a doctor messed up, somebody might die. In the law, you lose your property, you lose your rights, you may be fined, things like that. But it is a system that's fraught with so much error because at every stage, it depends on people to move it along. Let me walk you through it. First, you have the people involved in the incident. Well, they're going to remember what happened very differently. They're going to see it differently. They're going to recall it differently, and they'll have their own reasons, and some of it may be conscious or subconscious as to why some stuff they can't remember. Other things they can remember. And I'll give you a good example. They were talking to a young man in two different interviews. The first interview, in the collapse, he could almost remember nothing about the collapse. He got out of the collapse in Miami. Well, several, a week or so later, when I saw him in another interview, he was much more detailed about what happened. Why? His memory was giving him more information. So we start with the two people. Then we bring in investigators, right? We bring in police officers or whoever it may be, the scientists. Again, they're people, more error. And every time you add another layer of people involved in a situation, the potential for mistakes grows exponentially. Then we add the actual prosecutors, the attorneys, and finally you get down to the jurors. And Lord forbid you put your hands in six strangers to decide the fate of your life, your property. The potential error factor is just astronomical in that regard. Then we go back a step and look at the laws that are in place that are being used. Those laws are created by who? Again, people. People who have their own motivations, their own agendas, and various reasons why they put those laws in place. Now, let's specifically look at the Bill Cosby case in its pieces. First, I've never been drugged. I've never been, put in a situation where I lost my faculties and all that kind of stuff. But I worry about young ladies and women in general who are subjected to the unwanted advances of men throughout their lives. How do I know that? Because men, we work on the law of averages, right? We take a shot at 10, hopefully we get to 1. So all those are unwanted advances that whoever had those had to reject and turn around. So it's nothing new when a man makes overtures to a woman. And women, I mean, it's not, okay, I know I'm going to get some bad emails, but so what? Y'all send the emails.
Oh, I was about to make my note because it seems like a one-sided conversation.
I know I'm going to get some emails on this, Pete, and I know Anna's just staring at you, shaking her head right now, but just bear with me on this. There are certain signs I know when a man is setting you up. Hey, let's go to dinner. Can I buy you a drink? You sure look good today, honey. How about you come over to my place later? Let me get you something to drink. All these are steps towards some other ulterior motive. And I'm not going to say what Pete said the other week that could have gotten us banned off the air for a year, but you know where they're trying to get to. I told my daughter, I said, sweetheart, good guys and bad boys have the same GPS, same destination. They're just using a different GPS. They're all trying to get to the same place. So when Miss Constant shows up at Bill's house, she's sending him signals that, this may be something else. And Bill goes into his game book, what he said it was. I give the young ladies something to help them relax and, go along with whatever he's trying to do. But so I think that all along we knew that there was some kind of in this thing that was just messy. Go ahead, send the emails. I don't care. Now, that starts it. She says, hey, Bill, I didn't want this to happen. And they go after him. And the prosecutor decides, I don't have enough evidence to prosecute Bill. I don't have enough evidence. I got her saying, he was consensual. I got him saying it was consensual. I can't prosecute this. But I want her to get something out of the deal. So Castor says, listen, Bill, you participate in the civil case, give your deposition, and we won't charge you. Period. That's what he did. So when Bill Cosby gave that deposition testimony, in effect, he was giving up his Fifth Amendment right to not self-incriminate himself. With that being said, he doesn't give that deposition without that assurance. Now, here's where it gets kind of murky is usually there's some document somewhere, a non-prosecution agreement somewhere.
Correct.
This didn't have one. Now, that's that case. That's in 2005 or 7 or whatever it is. Fast forward to when Bill gets prosecuted. The new prosecutor campaigns on the slogan of, if you elect me, I will prosecute Bill Cosby. That is the epitome of a political prosecution. And so he gets elected, and what does he do? He prosecutes Bill Cosby. Now, it was a win-win for him, because if he prosecutes and loses, hey, I told you I'd do it. He prosecutes and wins, hey, I told you I'd do it. Either way, he wins. The loser in this was our judicial system, because it depends on people having confidence and trust in those people who run the system. I'm not happy that a man who may have molested and assaulted women, goes free. But if you were to say Bill Cosby walked away free, I don't think so. Bill Cosby's life is pretty messed up. At 83, he's older. He's lost his eyesight. He's cost him a bunch of money. He spent time in prison, So I don't know who he had to pay off in jail to get his snacks.
Get his jello.
This has not been a. But I'm saying this to say that if you think the only punishment that's appropriate for people is to put them in jail, then you're sadly mistaken. That's our manly way of punishing people. But Bill Cosby has lost all his stature in the community. His business is all out in the public, and he still has a lot of civil cases out there that have to be dealt with. So I think the rule of law in that situation may have prevailed. But it was a week of the rule of law.
Clint, before you go on further, can I say one more thing about this Cosby case? People have to understand that all victims are not necessarily victims under the rule of law. But remember, prosecutors have an obligation to the voters to say, I don't want you to accuse me of being soft on crime, regardless of whether the evidence is there or not. And you see it in a lot of black cases. That's why you see so many exonerations and all. So they don't want to be accused of being soft on crime. And the other thing about it, whether we like it or not, in the judicial system, the courts generally do not favor public defenders. They just don't. I've been around long enough to see cases that should have been thrown out at the local level, and the court will say, well, it's probably going to come back on appeal, but that's your choice. So I want to keep it real with that. But that's an issue because, and I'm talking about all over the country, black and white judges, Hispanic judges. So I want to be clear on that, and I can't wait till we get this other subject with the herbs because.
But no, y'all can't just leave with that. So I'm gonna have to stick a pin. Let me stick the pin in this. These were scholarly and legal opinions, and they're all true and fact based. But there's a great amount of the American citizenry that believe they're like, okay, this stuff happens all the time. Why'd she go over there? Just like Tyson. See, my motto's always, OJ did it. Tyson didn't rape that woman, and Bill shouldn't have been in jail. See, it's always been that. So while we can talk about, I'm getting a no. So while we can make the legal argument about what happened and whether or not the attorney general or the district attorney lied, in which they did. There are people out there who just look at the case at face value. We don't need all this, and go that Bill got a rough. He just got it rough, and they gave it to him because they wanted to stick Bill. Because we know a lot, Clinton, we can call a lot of names like the Epstein is gone, Harvey Weinstein is still around. What's the dude that played in the Kevin somebody, Spacey. I mean, there are a lot of people out there that should have been in jail by now. So, I mean, we can talk about this in this legal way about what they did wrong and who's a victim, but Bill was ramrodded with this one. Okay, that's the pin. Now let's move.
You're right. I mean, what I was saying is, though, but the winner to me was the rule of law. The system got itself where it needed to be. Now, just so that there's some people out there, your head's popping off, you send me these text messages, I'm not going to respond to that. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the call-in number, 813-444-9588. You want a piece of this? Well, call in. Get some. There's plenty to go around. 813-444-9588. So if you want to call in, that is a call-in number, and you can join the conversation here. But like I was saying, the rule of law, it was a great week for the rule of law because we also had finally some trumped up charges that came down against the Trump organization and Trump CFO. Pete, when you finally saw that in New York State, finally some criminal charges are being brought related to Donald Trump's activities, what was your initial response?
Well, and remember that was a joint investigation. So I'm thinking in terms from a federal standpoint, it won't be too much to it, even from a state point, because you got to remember when you look at the rule of law in cases like this, there's generally a set aside will say, okay, Pete, if you pay us the 10% of the tax fraud and some other things, then we will minimize and recommend to the court that you do a minimum sentence. See, people get it mixed up when they talk about the maximum amount of time a person can serve. It's like the Chauvin case. They talk about a maximum period of time people can serve. It's based on a lot of calculated factors. And if all those factors are not there, then the person, even if I'm a judge and want to hammer him for the hell of it, it's going to be reversed. So I don't see, I think at the end of the day with these charges, initially with Trump, they'll pay a fine. I don't even see the accountant doing no more than maybe 6 months in federal prison or maybe a year in federal prison and 2 years of supervision, which they normally do for federal prisoners anyway.
This man is 73.
That's a very generous way to look at this. Go ahead, Professor.
Way.
I said, okay, so the CFO is 73 years old, and we know that you just talked about political prosecution with the law.
Hey, why does his age matter, though? Who cares how old he is?
Well, you just cited Bill Cosby's age and how his career may be over. So, and if it applies to a black guy, it applies to a white guy, right? It both ways. So my thing with this, we know trumped up charges, and this is another attempt to put pressure on any Trump allies, certainly his employees, to get them to flip. I mean, just the fact that they're coining or terming Trump's business as a criminal organization, anything to further muddy the waters in hopes that Trump can't run again. That's the biggest fear. If this guy was knocked out with that second impeachment or somehow now with this trumped up Select Committee that we're going to get to talk about, if he was a TKO, if you will, and all that the Democrats tried to do with him before he left, they wouldn't be still doing this because they won. The guy's gone. He can never come back. They're scared of him because I told you when I left the show, Trump took his base with them. Until they can wrestle that base from Trump, they got to keep beating this man and hope he does not rear his head.
That's correct.
You know, you make a key point there about the political nature, I think, of this whole dynamic. I don't doubt that there's a huge political part in this, but I think the political part is the embarrassment that they let him get away with the white-collar crimes in New York for so long, and no one really held him accountable. They kind of looked the other way. He's just one example. I think you can probably go to tons of mega millionaires in New York and other places around the country and find they have two sets of books. You know, I've run into a lot of businesses that have multiple sets of books or no books. You know, in this case, I guess he had too many books. You know, and then finally one or two of them kind of caught up with you. But I think the charges, if it's true what happened, I'm okay with them.
And we're talking about the CFO. We're not talking about Trump. We're talking about the CFO.
We're talking about the CFO. And the whole idea, of course, but this happens at low drug level. Pete, you know this from being in the courthouse, is you arrest the petty dope dealer on the street and you say, hey buddy, give us who you're working for, you going to jail. And he freezes up, I'm not ratting my buddies out. Okay, fine. Let's drop a 20-year sentence on you and see if you want to talk then. That may be what they're looking into here with this guy because he's such a loyal person to Donald Trump. But unfortunately, that's not going to carry the day, I don't think. I don't think you're going to get away with in this situation. But the political nature of this is one of Trump's bases with Trump. In fact, I think they'll be in Sarasota with Trump this weekend.
And the rain is gonna keep most of them, not the diehards. The diehards are gonna be there, buddy.
Listen, Trump's hair is plastic. It doesn't matter. He'll be fine. Listen to this though. They're trying to make Trump they're not trying to make people leave the base leave him at all. They're just gonna make him so toxic and try to make the association with him so toxic that base becomes irrelevant when it comes to general elections. They'll dominate the primaries and they'll produce more toxic candidates for the general election. And it's going to make that's my gut feeling on this, is where they're going to end up. And for whatever reason, from the party side of this, they keep, doubling down. The other thing, though, is from a cost standpoint, do you think it justified the means for them to spend this much time and effort going after Trump? And these are the only charges you came up with, though. This is all you got?
It's more to it than that. It's more to it than that. But at the end of the day, you will see, I don't think you'll see Trump doing jail time. I don't think you see the accountant doing jail time. Because when you look at the average appeal process time and all, and the arraignment and the whole bit, you're talking about, unless it's a plea or something, you're talking about 4 years out before a final disposition of the case. So, as far as that will help the Trump base. And not only that, but we keep forgetting that Trump, you may cut his head off, but it's a 7-head snake. So cutting Trump off means nothing. The base is going to be there. They're going to, when you look at what they got going in Congress and all like that, I don't blame them from a political standpoint. They're going to be more powerful even if Trump decides not to run, because of the way they have grown roots in the base all the way up the line, from elected officials to police officers, the whole bit. We just got a right-wing extremist part of the party now that's running things simply because it's a race issue, number one, and there's an income issue, number two, that keeps us as a Republican Party from going back to the middle of the road of true conservatism like we used to do. That's why they call it the Lincoln Reagan era. Well, that's gone right now, but it has not totally disappeared permanently.
I just got a message from Anna that we got to go to break real quick, but I wanted to get your thoughts again with our theme of the rule of law this week, the ruling in Arizona regarding voting rights. I will say my thoughts. It kind of surprised me that we got that ruling as quickly, that we got it, saying that it's okay to put certain restrictions in regarding voting when we're in an era of the need to get more people to vote. When you heard that come out, Professor, that the Supreme Court in Arizona upheld voting restrictions, what did that signal to you was going to be happening in the future?
Well, I don't know if anything's going to happen after that, but certainly I was happy when I saw it, because let's call it what it was. They stopped ballot harvesting. Yeah. So that reflects back on Georgia. So yeah, it was a win that we needed, because we know that was a loophole in the system. And we talk about loopholes for millionaires. That was a loophole for Stacey Abrams and the crew to grab all these hundreds of thousands of fresh new voters in a bag. So yeah, I'm glad it happened, and I hope that continues on. I certainly do.
Well, the thing,
because guess what? The election was stolen.
Well, I don't think it was stolen.
I'm not going to respond to that. I'm not going to respond to.
I know, that's why I put that in there. You can't even delete it.
We're going to talk about actually legitimate issues today. Pete, when you saw that ruling, what did that kind of imply? That Donald Trump would get what he wanted with the Supreme Court, having set up this supermajority?
No, not really. It's up to the people. Listen, if you want to vote, you're going to, when I think about our forefathers, the people in the 60s and 50s, if you want to vote, you're going to vote. And again, I had a brother get mad at me because I stay on the ID. We have an ID for everything. And so that's a red herring when the civil rights movement talking about voter ID. We need ID for everything. So if the state's paying for you to get a new ID that you never had before, stop being seeing about it and go ahead on and put your foot to the metal and say, okay, I want a free paid ID by the state. Now, after that's out the way, then you decide whether you want to vote or not, and it's up to the individual, because I don't care how easy we make it to vote. There are a lot of brothers and sisters out here uninterested in voting, period. They don't want to vote for the white man, and they don't want to vote for a brother who they think may be aligned with the white man. So we're going to go to break, Clint, and I'll let y'all simmer on that a little bit over this 4th of July weekend. Well,
we're coming back to that.
Anna said a break time.
All right, okay, great. I'm not going to dwell on it, but like I said,
2 minutes, I think. Okay, go ahead on it.
It was a great week for the rule of law, because I think no matter where you are on the political spectrum, everybody got a little something this week in what we saw come out of our judicial system, which means, guess what, everybody? Kind of like this show, it's straight up the middle, and it only stays there if both sides police what's happening and do their part. Pete said it first. We're going to take a break and come back. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the herb and some other stuff that's going on. It's Clarence Thomas chiming in here. You're going to get a Clarence Thomas quote on this show today. First, we'll be back. In Texas News Radio, reality radio, where everybody can be a star. We'll be back. Man.
We're playing your favorite old school. Today's R&B. With a smooth touch of jazz. You're listening to In Touch Radio.
Excuse me, but do this station keep you in touch?
A lot.
How do you like the music?
A lot.
Do they play your favorite songs?
A lot.
And in just 2 words, how do you like the station?
A lot.
There you have it, folks. The moral of the story is our listeners like us
A lot.
in touching you 24/7 on the World Wide Web. We're In Touch Radio.
Hey, this is Agent Wright, better known as Mr. Clean. You looking for some great barbecue? Come see them two brothers in the grill, located at 423 Virginia Street, Charleston, West Virginia. We got ribs, chicken, pulled pork, brisket, collard greens, mac and cheese, baby. Come get some and get you a nice, smooth cigar. 304-550-4431. That is 304-550-4431. Come get some, baby. The Rib Man, mama, the Rib Man.
All right, we're back live on Attention News Radio, reality radio where everybody can be a star. Again, my name is Clinton Paris. I'm one of the co-hosts on Straight Up the Middle. And, every week I come on this show and I'm all excited. And usually by Wednesday or Thursday, my juices start to get flowing because it is absolutely my therapy. And I hope that for those people who are at home listening, you get something out of the show. I know, a lot of you don't call in or you don't engage us. But I know that we late thought, and I'm going to go knock off a couple of questions that real quickly over what we covered in the first half of the show. One question I got was there prosecutor misconduct in the Bill Cosby case? Well, they have a real broad spectrum of opportunities to prosecute people, and I would much rather have prosecutors looking to push the laws as tightly as they can, and that we hope the system will balance itself back out. One of the other questions that somebody sent me is about unwanted advances and whether or not I want to make a disclosure to the public. No, I do not. I'm just talking about the facts of life. And listen, ladies, you out there listening, you want the unwanted advances. I'm going to tell you why. Because you never know when the guy you want to make the advance is going to make the advance. But if we get to such a place where men and women cannot engage with each other and see if there's some mutual desire to become, build a relationship, then you're stuck on, I guess, one of these dating apps or something somewhere where we let technology take over. But I'm gonna leave that at that. Okay, so I've addressed those two, and I said that's all I'm gonna do. So now we got the second part of the show is we want to deal with this issue regarding. I think the young lady's name is Sha'Carri Richardson. Phenomenal track athlete.
Yes. Howling out.
Breaks records going into the Olympics. Just a phenomenal athlete. And unfortunately, she has come up testing positive for marijuana. Now, here's a story that she put out. That I think it's her grandmother passed away. And so that her grandmother passed away. And so she smoked some
mother
weed.
or grandmother?
Now, mother. I don't know, her biological mother. I thought it was a grandmother. But let me say, somebody close to her passed away. So what that implies is she smoked the marijuana to calm her nerves or to help her process what she was experiencing emotionally. And now we have the Olympics coming out saying she is banned from participating. All right, Pete, I'm going to defer to you as our resident marijuana understanding expert on this. Who got it right? Who got it wrong on this one?
Obviously, when you look at her interview, and I looked at it twice, I saw 3 things there. Number one, she knew the rules going in. She knew that. And then I look at a case that just similar to come up is in the news about a young African-American female that for the second time was suspended for doping issues. This time she said that she was caught up in the aftermath of a personal abortion. Here's the thing I think about Carrie Richardson. Number one, I think it's a smokescreen from her. We have losses in our family all the time. There are many ways professional black professionals that could have helped her cope with, even peer group that cope with the loss of a mother, the biological mother, although she was raised by her grandmother. Then
Exactly.
then when you look at her interview, she gave that half-hearted apology. Well, I'm human. Well, that's understanding going into the rules. And when you're talking about, well, I'm only 21, that's a cop-out too. Let me tell you something. I've dealt with young people, 14 and 15, particularly females who've lost their mother or grandmother. They've sought help. In this case, she was a regular smoker, okay? I mean, if we all have smoked herb one way in our life, burned trees or used a roach clip or whatever the case might be over the
Don't
years.
put that on me, Pete.
I'm just saying, well, I'm telling you, when it happens in life. If you cannot give a full testimony of how far you've come in spite of your own misdoings in life, there's no testimony to give to teach our young people how to be even better leaders than ourselves. So when I looked at that interview, it was a fake interview, because if you look at her eye movement and then she says, well, I'm only 21. Listen, she just didn't start smoking herb, okay? It
Right.
had nothing to do with the loss of her mother. Now, I don't minimize that, not at all. But when you look at that interview, it's a fake response, and she's fortunate that particular black women are feeling more empathy than they should with regards to her. The international rule is the rule. They know it going in, and I don't think it'll be the last time. She's just immature for 21. Now, she got a lot of neighborhood in her, and I like hood sisters and neighborhood sisters. That means the whole neighborhood has raised them and made them
Yeah.
a better woman, okay? So I'm not
Preach.
negative, but it's a fake interview to try to cover up that's something that she thought she could get away with. That's as simple as that. If she was mourning the loss of the biological mama and they didn't have a lot of contact, who's the best person to help her cope through the whole thing? It's the grandmother.
Exactly.
I'll leave it at that.
All right. Well, now here's my piece on that, and I certainly agree, Pete. I didn't think it was a very truthful interview, but it's what you're going to say. I mean, because her career's on the line. She made a mistake. Unfortunately, she's young, just like most NBA players. I mean, they make that first mistake, it's on every front page, and now she's supposed to respond appropriately. And it doesn't happen like that. Michael Vick, prime example. He should have just said, "Yeah, I knew something about the dogs," but he lied. I mean, it's just one of those things. It's knee jerk, and you go with what people tell you. Hey, everybody believe it. Say your mom died. You're right. I can't dismiss what happened. It's unfortunate. Now, I do agree that marijuana, given that they're trying to legalize it, and it's up and down in different states, I think it should be like they do in well, not really in basketball, where you get suspended for a number of games or something like that. But in football, you might lose a season. I'm not sure what the penalty should be. I think it's kind of steep, given again that they're on the fence about what they're going to do with marijuana. Marijuana is not a performance enhancing drug. We all know that. Pete, you was trying to put us out there saying if you smoke some weed or some trees or something, whatever you smoke, marijuana is not one of those things that's going to make you run faster. So, if anything, it would have hurt her. Wouldn't have helped her do anything as far as her athletics.
Yeah, it hurt her, all right.
So,
Tony, you got a caller.
Anna, we got a caller on the line. Anna, you still have that caller there? So let's bring the caller in.
They hung up.
Nope. Okay. Well, let me say this right here. I have, it's one thing when Pete's wrong, and it's another thing when Pete and Tony, Professor Seabrook, are wrong at the same time. How can y'all miss this so badly?
So badly.
Did you set us up? I ain't hear anything.
So badly, Clint.
Listen.
Okay, here go your caller back.
You got callers back. Okay, let me get the caller, and then I'm gonna walk you through the track. Go ahead, caller. You're on In Touch News Radio. What's your comment?
Go ahead, caller, please. We're waiting on you. Hello, caller. Are you there?
Hey, can you hear me, Pete?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, this is Tammy Bay Tammy, and I just want to tell you, I'm watching y'all on YouTube, and I'm listening, and I have been commenting on this situation for a minute. First of all, I have had a serious loss in my family before, and I was devastated. And the first thing everyone offered me was value. The ministers, the therapists, the friends, everybody wanted to give you some value, some prescription. I turned it all down. I said, no, I'll smoke weed. And that's what I did. And it allowed me to go to sleep, rest, relax, and just sleep. Now, first of all, these rules or these drugs are put in place to stop an advantage. Weed does not create an advantage on anything, especially in running. So if anything, it would slow her down rather than speed her up. And I believe with all my heart that the rules are in place just for us. And as long as we'll go along with these rules, then we are part of the problem. Every time now, when the white man changed the rules, y'all gonna be all right with it. But right now, y'all against her. I think she did just what she needs to do: smoke some weed, go to sleep, and be done with it. She lost her family member, and she lives in a life like we never did. Her whole life is a PTSD situation to me. So, and I know doggone well, white children been getting prescriptions for anxiety of weed, and ours have never. We've been locked up for it, and they've been, when we self-medicate ourselves, but they have prescriptions. So I think it's unfair.
Preach, Tammy, preach.
Well, again, listen to what I said. It appeared to me when I looked at the interview 2 times, and plus the short interview with Lester Hope, it appeared that she was trying to come after the fact. She never mentioned that she even, because if you remember what she said, she learned of the passing through a reporter. But she never mentioned anything about seeking any consolence or anything from the grandmother. And here's the other thing that tipped me off why I think I understand her smoking the coal of nerves and all. I get that. But when she said, I'm only 21, to cover up, see, that's a giveaway to me. And
Right.
it's not like that she just started smoking. That was a tip to say, hey, I can use this as a legitimate excuse that I smoke, but she knew the rules going in. So if you know the rules going in, even during that sorrowful moment, I would think that she would reach out to somebody else. But she's just an immature 21-year-old. And I guarantee you, when she write a book, when she's about 28, how she made the comeback and all like that, she's going to talk about, I should have taken some stuff. Huh?
Who says she's going to survive that long?
I think she will. I think she will.
That devastate our children. They never recuperate. And we act like, the Congress knows the rules, but they still don't abide by them. The president knows the rules. He still doesn't abide by them, and we see no repercussions for them. But these are rules put in place that only snatch us down. And as soon as we as black people start saying no, I've been saying no to this weed situation a long time ago when others were not. But they were in Colorado making millions and millions of dollars on it. Didn't even have a bank to put it in. So, right. So I'm not into what she did, like it's so wrong, and I know all these other kids are doing it. If she was doing a drug that was giving her advantage over the other kids or the other young adults or whatever you want to call them, I would go along with it. But yeah, she is only 21, and no one should have to explain all their actions until they're questioned about their actions. You're not going out saying, oh, my grandmother died and I smoked some weed. Only reason she don't bring it up is if she's tested and there's a problem she has. So coming up with your defense, of course, you defend yourself once you're questioned, not before. And we as black people got to stop going with all the rules and turning our children in and let us do the same thing, and there's no sentence. Lady shoot up in the air. She locked up for I don't know how long. No, don't turn them in. Don't tell them. Don't confess. We can discipline our own children just like they can. And I just think it's not fair. And we need to say no, no, no. And we need to be protesting and saying, let her run. It's not an advantage. Weed is not an advantage, and that's what the rules were for, right? Let's stick with the game. They threw a fence up. They took our awards. They threw a fence up outside the Capitol when it led to protesters, and nothing has happened to them. Took those men awards back in the 60s. So we know that's not acceptable behavior, or should have thought it wasn't, but it's acceptable for them, just not for us.
Well, Tammy, you actually said what I said, that the weed is not a performance enhancing drug. So, and again, the fact that states are now on the fence, different states have different marijuana laws. I think there needs to be something done, because right now they're dealing with what's on the books.
And
This is a law that's on the books.
Too,
Now I can see the flip side of that. It's not a performance enhancing drug, but if you're getting sponsorships or people are paying you, and we know that the ruling came that these college players can now get paid. So now someone's putting money into you, and you are not doing a performance enhancing. You're doing something that's going to make you slow. I mean, so the flip side of that is also problematic.
I think, and before we go on to Clarence Thomas, whatever you have in mind in this short time, Clint, I think more to the story is going to come out. I think
Clint's muted. You're muted, Clint.
I think she's going to be stronger, and I think she's going to help young women her age between 18 and 21, because when you look at that and you look at, she's assertive enough to say, you know what, I'm going to move on up the ladder of success. And she's a fighter, and that's what I respect about her. She's a fighter. She's a little bit defensive, but she's a fighter. And I think when we look at it 3 years from now, we're going to see it.
What are we for our children? We just go along with anything they say. What are we? Now it's time for us to protest and say, and stand up and say, we don't think this is fair. This is legal all across the United States. This is not however you said, giving them advantage of, however the professor put it. So we need to fight, to me. Every time, it's like you don't toot your own horns, and sometimes when you hurt, you can't fight your own battle. It's time for us to fight for her and say, no, we don't think this is fair. And whatever the reason, when she came time to run, we will not help her win no race. And she won that race, and she deserves her opportunity, period. And if she gets some therapy behind it, fine. Just like that tennis star. All of a sudden, they wanted to be all on her case because she didn't feel like she wanted to do. They rewrite the rules when we do things. They rewrote the rules on Bitcoin. They rewrote the rules on Congress. They rewrote the rules on president. Now, these are rules, and rules are made to be broken, and rules are changed all the time. So we just got to have the guts and the balls to stand up and try to change some things.
I like that. One reminder: this is an international rule. I'm sure if it was left up to America by itself, they would waive it and say, okay, we're going to waive the suspension. But this is an international rule. And when you look,
that's a good point, Pete.
And when you look at the makeup of the international body of Olympics, I will remind people that a lot of African countries help make up that rule. And trust me, in a lot of African countries, you better not be caught with not even a cigarette to roll up into some herb. I'm just saying, so we got to keep it honest with the people so they can look at things and we just talked about it earlier, the rule of law. If I was on the Olympics for here, I would wave it and say, let the lady run. But remember, she didn't get caught as much as the American law. She got caught in the international law. So when I look at it from an independent perspective, I'm thinking, what about those brothers and sisters that make up the voting bloc in Olympic rules that come from countries of color or even African countries who we run the show, and they voted to put that rule in? Just saying, keep it honest.
All right. Well, we appreciate you calling in, Tammy. Thank you for your perspective. And I know that we're in a space in America, we're transitioning from how and why we've criminalized certain things and not criminalized other things, and how we look at them. And particularly our younger generation has gotten caught up in that transition. And this young lady, unfortunately, as Pete mentioned, on the international stage, there's a different view of how marijuana is handled worldwide versus in America. And I'll say this about America and how marijuana, basically, it's kind of like what happened with alcohol during Prohibition. It's lost the fight. It's not giving up the fight because there's some new revelation and all that stuff. It is basically realized we can't stop people from using marijuana in the United States. And so America's attitudes, and guess what it's doing? It's doing what it does with everything else. It's monetizing it. We can't stop it. Well, let's make some money on it. Let's turn it into capitalism. But Pete, you've been itching. You've been itching to talk about Clarence Thomas. And I know people were surprised, and I said, yes, we will be talking about, Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. He came out with some comments about marijuana. Pete, you have a response to that. What were your thoughts?
Well, here's the thing. The comments that he made, of course he'll make them now because more and more white people are getting affected by some of these state rulings and the federal law that says marijuana is illegal. But when I look at it from an African American perspective, especially a hood brother like I think I am, it's fake from him. Okay, the black community, under no circumstances, should depend on Clarence Thomas to give us any meaning or any perspective from a positive nature that's going to be fair to us. That's not going to happen. Now, what he's talking about is that the Supreme Court feels that they don't want to. Eventually, if it goes back to them, they're going to throw out the federal law about marijuana being a level 1 drug or something like that. But look, it's too late now. Look at how many of all our kids are damaged and going to jail for it and all. But I will say this, and I'm serious about this from an African American point of view only. Forget about the white people, but I'm talking about as we raise a new generation. I deplore young people who, under the age of 16, openly smoke marijuana on the street. It's bad enough that they're selling it now in that crystal meth, especially downtown in Tampa and parts of East Tampa. But I have no sympathy for young people who get caught selling marijuana, crystal meth, or smoking marijuana openly on the street corners, by the bus stops and all, and they're only 14 and 15 years old. Now, we can say we don't want the police to deal with them, but then the community needs to deal with it. If you grown, you want to smoke your herb, burn your trees, use a roach clip, fine, I get that. But when you're talking about what we're seeing now, and we keep trying to bear it, 12, 13, and 14, and 15-year-old, particularly 15 and 16-year-old young girls trying to sell marijuana and asking you to go into Circle K and buy the spiffs or whatever they want to put the reefer in, that's wrong. And so they're going to make marijuana legal across the country, and they're going to throw out the federal case. But the black community has a moral question that we have to ask ourselves, regardless of the American law. Do we want minors to be openly smoking marijuana and selling drugs, marijuana half an ounce and all that kind of stuff on the streets in our community? Now, that's the bigger issue for me.
Professor, what did you think about Clarence Thomas wading in on this situation? It's unusual for him to jump in on something like this.
Well, no, it's not unusual. Supreme Court justices also have their opinions out there. You guys just picking on Clarence Thomas, but what he said was pretty much what Pete's saying right now, and I said it before we moved here in the context of Sha'Carri Richardson. Right now, state laws are often conflicting with federal law. And what he's saying is, it used to be a comprehensive law, but now, with all the variations, we need to do something. That makes perfect sense. It's just the fact that it came from Clarence Thomas that it just bothers people. But I think Pete's position may be a bit untenable when we're trying to carve out an age group for African Americans. And I've said this before, unfortunately, African American as a group, when these social things, drugs are passed, they affect us differently. If we're going to look at things head on, when we look at single parent households, we're already 1 foot. It's not as strong. And when you interject drugs and think it's going to alter someone's ability to rationalize at a young age. But here's the thing. The way kids are raised, you can't tell them, well, you can't do this until you're 17. Why do you think they're drinking now? I mean, you just can't stop that. That's a very untenable position to have. I don't know the answer to that, but to think that somehow, we need to really be on our kids, I agree with that. So that's, I don't want to say that I'm disputing that, but I don't know how we go forward with something that Pete just said.
Well, we need
I don't like to see
leadership. We need a future leadership, and if we can't, if they're gonna be locked up for openly selling with all the cameras out there and all of that, and then they're not even, a lot of them are taking the doggone money and buying false hair and all of the other foolishness and cars.
All right, Pete, you're going too far. You got
a caller.
Hold on real quickly. We got a caller calling in. Hey, Anna, let's get that caller on real quick.
Go ahead, caller.
Caller, we've got 1 minute. Tell us what's on your mind.
I actually had comments just going back to, the young runner and her issue with marijuana and, what she's dealing with the Olympics. I'm sorry, I didn't have comments on Clarence Thomas, but I was trying to call in then. But it made me just think back to, and if you all have time over the weekend, a couple of years ago, Bryant Gumbel, he's done maybe like 2 investigations on the Olympics committee and how corrupt it is. And so oftentimes when things like this happen, I wonder why Americans, especially Black Americans, still choose to participate with this organization. There's several, in his documentary, he shows how when they build the stadiums, they displace families, poor families. They end up with not having a place to live. They showed that in Japan. I think in one area they built an area for people to work in during the Olympics, and when it ended, those people were left there with no water, no food, and I think they still reside in that area. They also have been accused of silencing the news of any bad news, I think when they were in China as well. Even with the Olympics in Brazil, they had several issues, and I think that's when he did the second investigation on them, how they were hiding some of the darker people that from Brazil, darker-skinned Brazilians. So there's just a lot, and it really runs deep, like, the debt that some of the Olympic people that participate come out with by even being in the Olympics. So I think that maybe that's just something I wanted to share, and I think more people should look at and really just consider, should we even as Americans still participate in something that's so corrupt?
Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for calling in. Capitalism has its way of finding its way into anything that we do. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the show, and I don't want to hog the microphone. Congratulations. Happy.
Soon, but are you all familiar with any of the corruption that has gone on for so many years?
Yes.
Absolutely. And anyway, anywhere that you find money to be made, you're going to find corruption. The Olympic Committee, and so in the anti-doping agency, which runs the overarching drugging, policing, and stuff. And that's been around for a long time. But we know that that's going to be manipulated, that communities are going to be gentrified. It is just a result of what capitalism does when it has an opportunity. And the Olympics gives each country a chance to target an area and do that as they roll around. But unfortunately, we're at the end of the show. Professor, closing comments as we go into this 4th of July weekend.
Well, given all the leftist policies about how bad America is, I celebrate this independence, but I do it with this. And it's to answer all the questions that we have. Coram Deo means living before the face of God. So if we do it as we're doing it to God, we don't have this to worry about. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Thank you very much. Pete, go ahead and close us out.
I just want to say, look, at the end of the day, we have to prepare our young people to take our place in leadership. They have better ideas in some cases. And if we're going to have them on the street selling acid and them white people drugs and all like that, at a minor age, it's not doing us any good. So once they get grown, they want to do that, fine. But we got to get our kids ready for this new leadership that we need in this country. So we've got a choice to make. Do we tighten them up early, or do we let the system tighten them up and then we have no leadership? That's all I got to say.
Outstanding. Thank you. Thank you very much, Pete. Appreciate you joining us this week, Professor. This has been In Touch News Radio, reality radio where everybody can be a star. See you next week.